It's 5 o'clock on Friday night, so you know what time it is. Time for another episode of Erik Wait Live. Alrighty, hey, I want to thank everyone for tuning in or watching on the replay. Mike Bennett, thank you much for tuning in. Stephen Crabtree, Whiskey Music was the first in the house. Michael C. 2019 or 2019, however you want to say that. So this evening, we're looking at Glendronach Distillery, Huntly Castle, and one other. If we have time for it at the end, one other thing I want to look at. So one of the things that I'm into, and I'm repeating myself if you've heard me, if you've been watching me for a while, wine and whiskey are an avenue or a gateway into learning about other things: culture, music, geography, history. So for me to study a region, whether it's a wine region or a whiskey region, is more than just the liquid. Of course, you learn a little bit about science, right? You learn about people, because a lot about whiskey and wine is about the people. Why they did what they did, why they went into it, all the trials and tribulations it takes to get into the wine business, get into the whiskey business. Daniel Whittington was on Rob Whiskey in the Sixes show last night, Thursday night. And one of the things he commented on, I've heard it many times, is you don't go into the whiskey business in order to get rich, right? You don't go into becoming a musician, in the case he was using, to get rich. If that's what you want to do, there's a lot of better ways to do it. It takes a large fortune to make a small fortune in the whiskey business or in the wine business. So people get into it because they have a passion for it. And that is what I find interesting, is the drive to produce whiskey or wine. I'll stop talking about wine. To produce whiskey, despite the fact of all the hoops you're going to have to jump through, whether it's the legal hoops, dealing with agricultural hoops. If you go through my history of Scotch whiskey and you look at the booms and the busts, a lot of the busts are due to agricultural problems. You bad harvest of wheat or bad harvest of grapes and so on and so forth. So getting into the people's stories as to why they do what they do, it's also a big part of it. Silverlock Whiskey Club, thank you much for tuning in. Whiskey Straight Out, thank you much for tuning in, man. So I just poured myself a little bit of the Glendronach Peated. The full review should be out this coming Sunday. So I'm not other than telling you, I like it. Other than that, that's as much a review you're going to get. I'm not going to give you my notes. I'm not going to give you any notes about this particular whiskey, but other than I'm going to say, I like it. I really like the whiskey. So my full review will be out on Sunday. I have two other bottles here just standing by. My first exposure with Glendronach Distillery were like, I bought these minis. At the very beginning of my whiskey journey, I bought like 104 minis, had them shipped over. And so I had tasted a bunch of Glendronachs that way. And I've said this before is, the little minis are fine to kind of experience some things, but you get a different experience with going through a whole bottle. This here is a handful cask. This is what the numbers were on it. You gotta pull it out. This is the only whiskey that I can recall. Ooh, getting near empty. That I ever gave 100 points. So I filled this myself, straight from the cask. It was distilled in 1994, bottled on July 16, 2019 by moi. And it was cask 172 of 5,086. And it's 100% sherry cask at 54.7% alcohol by volume. And it was a something punching. Can't read the handwriting on. Anyway, so if you ever get a chance to go to Glendronach Distillery, absolutely get yourself a cask. Get yourself a bottle. It's obviously not going to be the same cask, right? Do the hand fill. Do the hand fill. This, I still have a sample over here. I'll show it to you real quick. In fact, tell you what I'm going to do. So, I wasn't planning on this. Maybe not. I'll hold off to another. This is a sample of the Macallan number 6. The Macallan number 6, the Lalique bottle. I have another full sample over here. That's the bottle. It costs like, I don't know, like $3,000 or $4,000. Here's another sample. I got this from the Scotch for Dummies. A sample of the Macallan number 6. This, in my humble opinion, is better than the Macallan number 6. How much did I pay for it at the distillery? If I recall correctly, I don't know. It might have been like 175 pounds. That's from memory. It could be. I could be off. And then the conversion rate was probably around $300 American. So if you ever get the chance to go to Glendronach Distillery, this is what you want. This is what you want. Almost worth going all the way to Speyside just to get a bottle. All right. Even if you don't have time to do a tour of the distillery, this is what you want. All right. I think I've sold that one. Derek Beckman, thank you much for tuning in, man. Judith Stowell, thank you very much for tuning in. So tonight, however, I'm drinking the peated. Wow, that is awesome. So this one, I've gone through a couple of these. I've not yet reviewed it. This is the 2018, and I've given away bottles of this. 100% Oloroso, the Alderis. No, excuse me. Yeah, Alderis. Alderdice. I keep saying it. Eventually I'll pronounce it correctly if I say it enough times. Alderdice. And this name's going to come up in a video I'm going to show here in a minute. 100% Oloroso. It is a sherry bomb. A sherry bomb. Absolutely spectacular whiskey. There is a name that he said, "Howdy, Eric. It's 4 a.m. here in Moscow, but I woke up early, Don, to be watching." Wow. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I apologize because I can't read Russian. Anyway, thank you much for tuning in. Do svidaniya. That's about as much as I know in Russian. Alrighty. So let's get into a little bit about Glendronach Distillery, because that's what we do here. And I got to find the right thing to push. All right. So one of the challenging things about learning about distilleries is they change hands. Some of them get bought out by major conglomerates. Some of them get bought out by the Japanese, Beam Suntory, some Diageo, Pernod Ricard. However, there is Glenfarclas, which is still family owned, which is totally cool. Really like that. They don't do a peated whiskey. Otherwise, I'd like to review one of them. But Glendronach Distillery really has changed hands a lot. So I'll quickly just go over the history of Glendronach. All right. So founded in 1826 by James Alderis, also known as Alderdice, as the second distillery to apply for a license to legally produce whiskey under the Excise Act of 1823. The first I recall correctly was Glenlivet. 1881, the distillery was sold to Walter Scott. In 1920, the distillery was sold to Charles Grant, son of the founder of Glenfiddich Distillery. In 1960, the distillery was sold to Teachers and Sons Limited, who increased the number of stills from 2 to 6. 1996, the distillery was mothballed. So the 1980s were one of the bust periods of Scotch whiskey. So distilleries were closed in the 80s and then going into the 1990s. In 2002, the distillery was reopened again by Allied Distillers Limited. In 2006, the distillery was sold to Chivas Brothers as part of the Pernod Ricard group. So, changing hands, it can be really challenging to sort of keep up with this. In 2008, the distillery was sold to Ben Riach Distillery Company. And in 2016, it was purchased by the Brown-Forman Corporation, and the deal included Ben Riach and Glenglassaugh distilleries. I have a Glenglassaugh peated whiskey, which I will be reviewing in the very near future. Alrighty, so that's sort of a brief flyover history of Glendronach Distillery. Now I'm going to show you a video, and hopefully last week the music was a little too loud. I brought it down to about 50% or less, so hopefully the music is not going to be too loud tonight. Lito Cortez, thank you very much for tuning in. James Morgan, thank you very much for tuning in. RMS Smart, thank you very much for tuning in. So I'm going to show you a little video of Glendronach Distillery, and I'll make some comments about it afterwards and drop a few comments along the way. So one of the things I like to do, if you can go there, if you can go to a distillery, you can be there, get a sense of the place and meet the people. That's the way to go. I've been to 40 distilleries in Scotland. However, if I can't do that, search around on the internet, see if you can find videos. There are a few out there of distilleries where they do, where you can actually watch the video. It's like a 4K 3D thing, and you can actually control it to see what part of the distillery you're looking at. For example, Teeling Distillery has one like that. I had Frank on, a rep from Teeling Distillery, and we did sort of the 3D tour around. There are a few of those around as well. However, these are some photos and video that I took while visiting the distillery. Here we go. Alrighty, so a question was asked during the video. Dirty Dog says, with all the distillery owner changes, do you think this had a hand in Billy Walker leaving Glendronach? I think changing hands is sort of par for the norm. It's funny because in watching various companies and if you buy stocks and you do need stock training, there are a lot of companies right now where corporate heads, or not necessarily a CEO, but people within the top ranks of various corporations, they're leaving like crazy right now. They're bailing ship. Boom, boom, boom. They're bailing, bang, bang. However, some are going lateral to some other company, and some, if you look at their age and how long they've been in a business, sometimes it's just a matter of rotation. So unless they specifically said that's the reason why they're leaving, it's hard to tell. You have to kind of look, and some people kind of move. So some people move around because of opportunities. Roy Aquavite just had I think it was a distillery manager on for Tomatin on the show. Last name is Eunice, Eunice. He was born on Orkney. If you haven't seen the interview, I think it was last week's. I can't remember if this week's or last week. No, it was last week's show on Aquavite. Check that out. And note how many different distilleries. He moved to like 5 different distilleries. So it's hard to tell. There are, I think, part of, particularly if you're on the mainland, the way to get promoted or to do something different or to do something different than what you're doing is you got to move on. You got to move somewhere else. So on Isla, right, we just had changes over at Ardbeg. They're born on the island, they stay on the island, but in order to move along and move up, they change distilleries. Others, maybe they just want to do something a little bit different. So it's hard to tell. So Silverlock says Billy Walker bought Glenallachie. Right. There's been a lot of talk about Glenallachie after selling Glendronach. So as to really, unless he states somewhere as to why he made that move. And so, right. So a lot of people talk about Glenallachie, or in Italian, Glenallachie, unless he specifically stated as to why he did it. Maybe just do something different. Sometimes people, they're gonna want to do something different. So anyway, alrighty. So Glendronach Distillery. A lot of distilleries produce sherried whiskeys, but there are certain distilleries that seem to be particularly known for their sherry casks. And so if you really want to get to know really what a sherried whiskey is, those are the particular distilleries you want to check out. That's sort of that sort of classically known sherry profile. Macallan, for example, Aberlour, and I think Glendronach is another one that sort of fits in that category. If there is another, for you guys, hey, Michael Hassler, thanks for tuning in. If there is another distillery that you think is sort of known for its sherry casks, put a comment down below or in the chat if you're watching during live. When you think of sherry cask whiskeys, what comes to your mind? For me, even though Ugdal for Ardbeg is sherry cask. When I think of sherry cask for Isla, I think of Bruichladdich. I think of Bunnahabhain. I think of the Bunnahabhain 12. Edredour, right? Silverlock Whiskey Club says Edredour. Everwin says Tamdhu. Mike Bennett says Glenfarclas. Glengoyne, Aberlour. Right. But if you think of, now think of these distilleries. How many of these distilleries do something other than sherry cask? And now think about Macallan, think about Glendronach. How, in comparison to these other distilleries, how often, other than bourbon cask, right? You get bourbon cask, sherry cask. How much do they go outside of classic bourbon cask and classic sherry cask? So Glengoyne, for example, Burgundy casks. They do some other casks other than those. Dirt Dog says, my first really, really sherry cask was a Macallan. For me too. The Macallan 12-year-old. The Macallan 12-year-old. So when I think of sherry, I think of Glendronach. I don't think of peated whiskey. Again, I'm not going to give you full notes on it, but I'm going to tell you right now. At the end of this series of doing Highland peated whiskeys, I'm going to give you my top 5. I'm going to give you my top 5 of Highland peated whiskeys. And I'll have to go over my notes. I'll have to retaste some of these whiskeys that I've tasted this far, right? Because memory sort of fades. I want to go back and retaste some of them. But saying right now, this one is a contender. This is a contender for the top 5 for Highland peated whiskeys. Speaking of peat, this week on Wednesday, I reviewed the Black Pits Irish whiskey. Black Pits Irish whiskey. The main purpose, because I'm not doing Irish whiskeys right now, the main purpose of wanting to review this was to potentially, based on its character, it might be interesting to do a comparison between Black Pits and a Highland peated whiskey. It didn't rise to the challenge of competing against any of them. If I was going to put it up against a Highland peated whiskey, it would be the Tamantau with a peaty tang. Although it does have that sort of pepper note of a Talisker, as I mentioned in the video, if you didn't see it. But in terms of the fruitiness, the tropical fruitiness, that kind of a character to it, in terms of fruit character, it'd be more like Tamantau peaty tang. But the Tamantau peaty tang really undersells itself in terms of how much peat is really there. And it's only using partly peated barley. I think, and again, I kind of beat up on this a bit. Maybe I was a little too harsh. It's the imagery of the picture and how it's sort of being sold that is the real disappointment. Now, that's the chair squeaking, not me. This and Ballantrae, the Ballantrae 10, are close contenders. So one of the comments I made about Tamantau is I thought in terms of its fruit character, it reminded me of an Irish whiskey. If I recall correctly, the price was in the 40s, like $46, $47, somewhere around there. And I made a comment, the fruit character reminded me of an Irish whiskey. And the thing is, look at the imagery of it. Not only is it the fruit character remind me of an Irish whiskey, and I did an experiment where I took a Jameson and I put a couple drops of a Lafroig 10 in it, and I could see a resemblance. The visual reminds me of an Irish whiskey. The fruit character reminds me of an Irish whiskey. It doesn't. At first, it kind of had a mouthfeel of an Irish whiskey. As you get further down into it, that mouthfeel, creamy mouthfeel, kind of dissipates. It becomes across more as a malt, more of the cereal malt character to it. But at least at first, it even had the feel of it. So the imagery and what you're expecting, this actually undersells its character. The image of the bottle, the green, and all that, undersells its. You're surprised by the peat. You're surprised because you think of a tang, right? You think a tang is like you drink something that's got a lot of citric acid in it, maybe orange juice. Obviously, you get a little bit of a tang there, little twinge of a tang. And you're thinking, oh, it's just going to have this little boop of peat. No, it's a whole lot of peat, whole lot of smoke. There's a lot more going on there, which I don't mind. If you're a peat lover, you don't mind if you're actually getting more than what you expected. And that was the problem. The only problem. So it's really not a Black Pits Irish whiskey. It's a fruity, Sauterne cask, Ford Irish whiskey that has just a spot of pepper to it. Now, I know I'm sort of repeating what I already said in the review. But if you were to pick genres of music, let's take heavy metal, right? Black Sabbath, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and across the board, I would say majority of them, Motley Crue, the album covers are going to depict something which sort of relates to the style of music it is. You look at it, country music. Look at a country music album, right? And compare it to the album cover for a heavy metal band or classical or opera or any other various genre of music. While there can be plenty of variation in how they do their album covers, they're conveying an image of what's inside the music, right? This, and that's the main problem is and the Black Pits is it didn't do that. It didn't do that. I'm going to do something real quick. I'm doing this sort of on the fly, so this is going to be interesting. Give me a second here. I'm sort of do something here on the fly. See if we can do this. I'm going to bring up an image you may or may not be familiar with. Da-da-da-da. All right. Da-da-da-da. I've never done this on the fly, so this is going to be interesting. Nope, don't want that. Don't want that. Give me just a second here. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to show you an image. Okay, I just went and found an album cover. It's going to take a second to upload. You may or may not be familiar with this band. This is one of my favorite bands. Now look at that. All right, is somewhat reminiscent of the Black Teeling bottle, right? It's got this black. The name of the band is Alter Bridge. This is their second album. This is one of my favorite bands. I can't play the music because I would get a copyright strike. But check this band out and then listen to the music. They're sort of a melodic metal band, and my favorite album is called AB3. This image matches the music. It's sort of a dark color to it, dark tones to it. And if you listen to the music, it has that sort of, melodic metal sound to it. Absolutely killer band. Anyway, one of my favorite bands, if you're not familiar with them. Christian death metal. No, it's not Christian death metal. Anyway, but check them out. But if you listen to the music and you looked at the album cover, the two match, right? This is sort of like the ABCs of branding and advertising is the image you convey and what you're trying to say about it. And this is why I know this is we always say, it's the spirit. It's the whiskey that matters, not the stupid label. But good marketing, good branding has a match. Some of the best bottle covers. I'm getting way off on a tangent when I was originally planning on discussing. One of the best covers, or the best labels for a whiskey that really matches. Beautiful whiskeys, beautiful labels. 60 Hertz, he says, are you going to be comparing Inchwoman 12 and Glenturret 10? Not unless they're peated. Taylor actually says, I have Spotify. I have to check them out. Yeah, check them out. Or just check them out on YouTube. All their albums and stuff. They have a YouTube channel. Absolutely beautiful whiskey. Fall colors, apple pie, cinnamon, baking spices, peach cobbler that's the character of the whiskey. And the beauty of the labels matches the beauty of the whiskey and the style of the whiskey. Compass Box is one of those where it's not just a fancy label. They do absolutely Oh, a 60 hertz. Glendronach 10. So wow, thanks for letting me know about those whiskeys. I'll have to see if I can find them. I'm not familiar with those. If you search for Highland peated whiskeys, those, and when I was doing my research for all this, those did not come up. So I'll have to see if to find them. Sometimes those whiskeys are not necessarily available here in the United States, or if I wanted to get them here in the United States, I'm gonna pay twice the price because of tariffs, taxes, and shipping. And so I've only done it with a couple bottles. So anyway, I'm sort of off the path. Is your imagery and your branding, what is how it speaks about you or your product or whatever else, they need to match. They kind of need to be reflective of, and that's really what I had an issue with tealing on that one. The whiskey is okay; it's not the most complex thing in the world. The second thing, of course, was the price. I thought it's really a $45 whiskey. They're small batch is really the bottle you want to go with. Probably the highest quality price ratio whiskey that they've got. It's one of my, I think, top 5 for Irish whiskeys under $30. Dirty Dog says, do you think this also affects the Japanese whiskey brands? They have the Japanese symbols, but not really a link to what you'll be tasting. Japanese labels, in terms of the bottles, are some of the most beautiful labels there are, right? In fact, I have a video it'll post tomorrow. One of my shorts, it'll be the Hibiki Harmony. Beautiful bottle, right? All right. The danger is they can have really beautiful labels, and yet the whiskey inside is not really Japanese. It's something they got from Scotland or the United States or Canada, and they're doing this blending of them, and it would maybe they slap a little bit of Mizunara on it to give it sort of a Japanese, taste to it, a little bit of Japanese spice to it. I'm planning on doing a whole series just on Japanese whiskeys. I'm still trying to figure out the bottles I want to do and how I want to represent the distilleries. But from an academic standpoint, I can't avoid it. I've got to study Japan. I've got to study Canada. It's one of the big 5 of terms of whiskey producers. But I'm doing a little bit of research. Anyway, I'm get off on Japanese whiskeys. But yeah, image and taste. And we could be suckered for a pretty label. This happens with wines as well. And so because just looking at the color, just look at the color, forget the label for a second. It doesn't tell you much. Or whether you're talking about wines or whiskeys. And so sometimes the marketing here's the thing is, a smart whiskey distillery or a smart winery you don't want someone to buy a whiskey. You don't want them to buy one bottle. You want a repeat customer. You want them to come back and continue to buy. That was a great wine. That was a great whiskey. That was a great beer. That was a great restaurant. That was a great automobile. Whatever it is you're buying, you want them to come back. You want to develop a loyalty and a following. And you're only going to do that by having something quality. Because once you get burned, if you go, that was too expensive and did not deliver on the promise of the label, I'm not coming back, right? That's what you don't want. It's very foolish. Mike Bennett says, from a financial standpoint, I can avoid it. Yeah, absolutely. If you're talking about bang for the buck, quality price ratio, Japan is not where you're going to go. There's only really 2 Japanese whiskeys that I would recommend. The Hibiki Harmony. Sometimes at Costco, you can get it for $55. Or the Nika from the Barrel is the other one. The Nika from the Barrel is the other one that I would recommend. And I'm going to do a short video on that one as well. All righty, let's get back to Glendronach. So Glendronach, a pretty straightforward label. Since we're talking about labels, let's talk about Glendronach. Nothing too fancy, nothing too schmancy. It's just sort of classic. There's nothing about it that it necessarily makes me want to run and buy it, nor anything that makes me disagree with the quality of the whiskey versus the fancy label. Kind of straightforward, all uppercase lettering. When you're doing a label, so for example, if you look at the new Ben, have you seen the new Ben Romics? If you see the new Ben Romick label, they no longer have the more of a sort of a handwritten cursive looking label. They now have bold typed print with the Ben Romick. And if you look at the Balblair also now has this sort of blocked letter writing. So if you look at their Glendronach, it's all uppercase. What that there from a marketing standpoint, that's a wise thing to do. Here's the reason why. Writing in all uppercase forces your eye to slow down a little bit. It's also clearer. It's bolder. You can actually use uppercase letters and a smaller font size to get people's attention. So, for example, if you had upper and lower case, I'm just going to pick a number. Let's say a font size of 40, right? If you switch to all uppercase, you can actually drop the font size to, say, like 30, and you're equally going to still catch their eye. It just stands out. It's just about it standing out more. All uppercase also makes the eyeball slow down. So, if you look at Ben Romick and you look at Balblair, how they changed the font on I know people got upset that they made the change, but from a labeling standpoint, for clarity, it works. The problem is you get used to a particular symbol, a particular icon, a particular way of spelling and writing. You don't want them to change it. Think of the Coca-Cola font, right? You can take the Coca-Cola font and write the word cheesecake, and people will still read it as saying Coca-Cola, because that particular unique font of Coca-Cola is so associated with the beverage. You can write something else and you'll still associate it with Coca-Cola. Unfortunately, there's some modern evangelicals, whatever, they did this. They would write Jesus Christ with a Coca-Cola font. Maybe they thought they're being clever, whatever. I think it's actually not cool to associate Jesus's name with Coca-Cola. It's just stupid. Don't do that. All right, I'll move on. All right, so Glendronach, classic sherry cask, a distillery with a lot of character to it. I like the tour. I think it was a good standard tour. The top whiskey I've ever given a score to. Obviously, you can't run out and buy one of these. Get from the distillery. Was Glendronach, and thus far, I'm gonna have to go back and compare this with others. Thus far, this is a contender for the top 5 whiskeys coming out of Glendronach. Derek asks, I'm having a dram of Benriach, the Smoky 12. Interesting. It's a peated Speyside. We'll be reviewing it. I did the Benriach. So the Benriach, I did the Benriach 10. So I did a peated Benriach, but I did the Benriach 10, the Curiositas. I don't think they're calling it the Curiositas anymore, and I think they've changed. If I recall correctly, I think they've changed the labels on this. But again, look, actually, they use a lowercase for the N, E and N. But anyway, so the short answer is no, because I already did a Benriach peated. All righty. Whiskey Music says, okay, Coca-Cola has changed their font over the many years. They still have, while they'll use the simple text of Coca-Cola, just search Coca-Cola label on Google Images, while they'll use, the simple texts, maybe similar to this text, Coca-Cola, they have still maintained the fancy schmancy Coca-Cola writing. They've still maintained that as well. They've used them both, right? All righty. So next thing. Oh, so in addition to visiting distilleries, because let's say you go somewhere, and it depends on how scheduling distilleries. If the first tour is at 10 o'clock and you can grab that one and it's over by 11:30, and then you take a break for lunch, and then you do another distillery, say at 1 o'clock, and then that one is over, say at 3 o'clock, and then another distillery, their last tour of the day is at 4 o'clock. You can kind of hit 3 distilleries in a day. You might have to take some driver drams, which is these little bottles they'll give you, and taste them back at the hotel. But you can, at a maximum, you can fit in distillery tours in days 3. But you're kind of popping along, right? I mean, you're not dragging your feet, you're not goofing around too much. So every day that I was in Scotland, I either hit 2 distilleries or I hit 3 distilleries. On the days that I had went to 2 distilleries, excuse me, I would find something else to do other than visiting a distillery. And so last week we went to Orkney and we looked at Highland Park Distillery, and I showed you a video of the Standing Stones of Stanness and the Ring of Brodgar. All right, these stones that are 30 feet high, probably weigh, I don't know, 10 tons. They estimate to be 5,000 years old. And these, I mentioned in that live stream that these stones or similar type of architecture exist all over the UK. So we tend to think of, I did it again. What is that? It's funny, I keep forgetting it. It's the most famous one. It has a ring, and it was in Spinal Tap. I don't know why I keep forgetting this. The most famous one, I forget that name. Stonehenge. Thank you. The most famous one, and it's simple to pronounce. It's easier to pronounce than Rings of Brodgar, and then you got to forget it, right? Stonehenge. They're all over the UK, and there's similar architectural features around the world, right? And I'm going to talk a little about that in a little bit, actually. I meant to talk about it last week, and I kind of forgot. Yeah, Stonehenge. Let's take another sip. So there are other things to see and sort of get into the history of Scotland. Or if you're here in the United States and you're going to go to Kentucky or visit distilleries, there are other things to see. Or if you come to California, right? If you're going to go to wineries in Napa Valley, you come from out of the state, coming to California, you got to go see the redwoods. There are no redwoods like California anywhere else in the world. There are redwoods in Japan, but they're not like they got here in California. You got to go to the redwoods. You got to see the Pacific Ocean. Go over the Golden Gate Bridge. Don't spend a whole lot of time in San Francisco, but drive through. See the sights. There are other things to see. See historical buildings in the Napa Valley. There's buildings there from the 1800s before the earthquake. So they're other than just visiting winery, right? There are other things to see. And see, there's a geyser, Old Faithful geyser there as well. All right, same thing. Go to Scotland, see other things other than just the distilleries. And one of those things is, in addition to the Standing Stones of Stanness, there's a lot of mystery. We don't know about them, and but there's sort of the tradition, if you want to call it that, of building monuments with stones and then putting some sort of inscription on them, carried over into later generations, going all the way up into the 6th through 9th century AD. So this whole idea of making monuments for cultural, religious, political, whatever purposes, and having this sort of almost phallic, cylindrical standing stones continued. However, not as gigantic. So we're going to talk and go on to YouTube after this live stream if you're interested and look more into this. Do some writing. There's a lot of videos on the subject. So I'm going to show you a map real quick. So when I came back from Scotland after my 2 trips, I started looking more into the history of Scotland. And we think of Scotland, we think of William Wallace, William the Bruce. We think of bagpipes and kilts and haggis, right? So, but there's before all that, there are other cultures there. The early Scots, and one of them are the Picts. The Picts. I'm going to show you a map here real quick, and I'm not going to go spend a lot of time on this one, but I'll just show you the map. All right, so this is like 6th century AD, and the various groups, kingdoms of Scotland, right? So they have a Caledony, Pictland. So where Glendronach is, if you look in there, is basically the eastern, northeastern, and Speyside region was Pictland. And then you have these various other groups, right? Well, when I went to Glendronach Distillery and I went to Aberlour Distillery, I wanted to look for other sites to go see. And so you can search for simply something called standing stones. When I went to Balblair, I'll show you this one. This is, I don't know how to pronounce this. This is probably pronounced Clock Bjork. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But when you get to go to Balblair Distillery, there's sort of a country road that passes by some residential neighborhoods. And I had just kind of looked off to my left. And here is the standing stone. And it was surrounded by cattle of Clock Bjork. How do you pronounce that? And it's got some inscriptions on it. And we didn't know what the heck. It looks like just graffiti. But it's ancient inscriptions there. And they don't know. Now this is probably 10 feet tall, 10, 11 feet tall. So it's only about a third of the height of the standing stones at Stenness or at the Ring of Brodgar. So it's not as tall. But over closer to Glendronach, where a group, as I saw on the map, were the Picts. And so one of the things I wanted to do, let me take this off real quick. So one of the things I want to do while I was in the neighborhood, basically, I'm in the neighborhood, type in on a map, if you have a map search, just type in standing stones, and boom, it showed me where there were standing stones. So right down the road, let's see if there'll be a map in the video. So right down the road from about an hour from Glendronach and closer to Aberlour Distillery is a church, and then they have some standing stones or picked stones there, but these aren't the only ones. They're all over the place. So the church it's not like you drive down the road. Oh, there's a church with some standing stones. Let's pull into the parking lot. It's kind of a little bit of an adventure, a little bit of, I was like, is there really a church down this road? So I'm going down the road. It's kind of at a decline, and there's one lane in and out. So if another car is coming along, you're kind of stuck. You have to find a way to back up or something. I'm like, really? Why would you have a church at the end of this long, narrow road? It looks like you're going to some farmer's backyard. And it's interesting. You're going down this long, sort of steep, narrow road, and I'm in a rental car. I'm not in my truck. And you turn to the left, and then you pull into this old church parking lot. And I kind of want, on Sundays, you can tell me a bunch of parishioners are all coming down this road and going to church. And then if you look at the photo, you look at the surroundings of the church, I think there's more parishioners in the graveyard surrounding the church than are actually in the church. But you go there, you can check it out. You don't have to pay anything, and it seems to be open all day long. Richard Agnew says, what were the best distillery tours tastings you did whilst you were in Scotland? Well, I went to 40 distilleries. That's a lot of distilleries. Macallan tour was awesome. Almost all the distillery tours on Islay were awesome. The Glenlivet tour guide was awesome. The Whiskey Rev, who was my tour guide, he's a friend of Arroyo, Aquavite. He was my tour guide for Macallan Distillery. Was awesome. Aberlour, I was not thrilled with Aberlour. I'm not going to get into that. The tour was fine. The person who was doing it wasn't so great. Most of them, they're all, I'll be honest, they're all great tours. But anyway, so I want to show you, this is like 40 seconds, really, really short. Basically, I'm showing you the church, where the pick stones are at, and then you see the pick stones themselves in this little video. All right, here we go. So later pick stones, actually, the large population of the picks were converted to Christianity. So the later pick stones actually have Christian symbols on it, crosses on them, look very, very similar to Celtic crosses, such as the Kildalton cross. I don't know if you can see this. Anyway, I have a bottle of Ardbeg Kildalton. If you go to Ardbeg Distillery, there is the ruins of a little parish church there called Kildalton Chapel. It's from like the 4th century AD, or no, 5th century AD. So the Picts, a lot of the part of the population been converted to Christianity. So the early ones, there's like warring scenes on them. Some of them are quite, you get my drift, a little Greek, if you know what I mean, in terms of some of the imagery that's, the kind of same you see in the old Greek kind of stuff, you know what I mean, or on the pick stones. And you can tell how they got converted to Christianity because they still kept doing the engravings and the memorials and the stones, but the imagery had changed a bit. Whiskey Music says, I found the difference between a good tour and an okay tour is a tour guide. Absolutely. If they know their stuff, if they're, and also, and this, so before you go visiting, they don't tell you, you cannot take pictures here, right? Now you can have some alcoholic fumes in there, could be flammable. You don't want to cause any explosions. That's obvious. Diageo, in fact, made changes to all their distilleries so that they have like a meter, and whether or not they can do a tour or not, or whether or not they can take photos or not, they can actually measure what's in the air and know whether it's safe, right? So all the Diageo distilleries are now safe to tour because they have a little thing for measuring what's in the air. Some of the other distilleries, if they don't have one of those devices, then they can't do that if they're running the stills. Some distilleries, in fact, most distilleries have like a downtime during the summer. They take like a month off. And so the stills are shut down. And so during that time, you can take photos around the stills because they're not operational. I actually preferred taking photos of the stills when they're not operational, when the room is really, really, really hot. So I did a tour of Glengoyne, and the stills were operating. And the only place you could take, so if they open up these wide doors and you stand sort of back, almost in the parking lot, you can kind of get a shot in that ways into the distillery. So they wouldn't let you take pictures inside there. And it was really, really, really hot in there. So if you can, Eric McDaniel, thank you much for tuning in. So if you can visit a distillery when they're in the sort of their vacation time in the summertime, then you better off taking pictures, which I liked a lot. I liked a lot more. So Dram Bam, thank you, ma'am, says Erik Wait history studies. Hey, it's part of the study. It's all part of the thing. So if you're interested, you want to learn more about the standing stones of Stendhal, or you want to learn more about the Picts. Who were the Picts? Apparently they're supposed to be really, really fierce fighters, and they like to paint themselves blue and put like these weird tattoo. I don't know if they were painted on or tattooed, but these weird designs. I mean, they look like some crazies, right? Some real crazies. So maybe that'll intrigue you. Really? They paint themselves blue? I got to check this out. So check out some videos. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about that. Entel 10 broke. Do you think Glendronach changed after? I always asked that question. That's funny. And if so, in what way? I missed the first 20 minutes. Yeah. I would need to go back and taste some more. Yeah. Basically, they were pagans. And so they dressed, or they were trick-or-treaters, or they were like, the people you see at Star Trek conventions or Comic-Con. They look like, or you go to Berkeley, go to Telegraph Avenue, Berkeley. They look like that, I mean, they look like Californians, or trick-or-treaters. Anyway, all right. So, gonna wrap it up in about 6 minutes. All right. So, Richard Agnew, what's the ppms on that Glendronach? I don't know. Good question. If I were to estimate, it's probably a standard 55 ppm. What the peat is before it goes into the mash isn't as important as what remains after distillation and aging. And I kind of covered this before in the previous video, but so you could have 2 whiskeys at 55 ppm. It goes through the fermentation process, the mashing process, goes through the stills. How do you do your cuts? Do you double distill, triple distill? One of the reasons why that Teeling peated has very, very little left is because they triple distilled it. I think that was a huge mistake. They should have double distilled it and don't cut in so much of it. It's the cuts. So what you lose in the tails of a cut is a lot of the phenolics. What is peat, smoke, and all that stuff in your whiskey? It's the phenolics from the peat. And that is when what's going to get cut off, right? So how you do cuts is a big determiner. And then aging. While you can find some 25-year-old Lafroigs that have put plenty of peat. Excuse me, I'm sort of burping here. 25-year-old that have plenty of peat in them. They can also get less peaty. This is why young peated whiskeys, such as the Wee Beastie or the Lagavulin 8, still maintain the heavy peat smoke character on them because of the youth. The peat, in terms of young whiskeys, also helps a little bit mask the youth. I mean, you still get that green fruit character in there, but it's sort of counterbalanced with the peat character, which kind of makes them pleasant. So anyway, Stephen Crabtree. So all Irish whiskey isn't triple distilled? No, that's sort of a myth. Most of your Middleton distilleries are not triple distilled. No, a lot of them aren't. Bushmills, triple distilled. So I did all 4 months on Irish whiskeys. Check those out, and you'll see a lot of them aren't triple distilled, and they're not all pot distilled. So anyway, so check out the videos I did during the Irish Whiskey Month. The only reason why I reviewed that Irish whiskey during this time period is I was hoping that there'd be something comparable, and I can kind of do a comparison between an Irish and a Scotch. It didn't work out. This wasn't a good match for any Irish to go up against any Scottish whiskeys. 60 Hertz says, because the faints are recycled, they contribute to the hearts cut in the next run and the next run, the next run. Yes, but they also drop a lot as well. So, Stephen Crabtree, you're very welcome. You're here to learn. I'm here to learn. In preparing information and studying and doing the research and then sharing, I'm a fellow student. I'm just passing along stuff that I've already studied. Alrighty, so I got a couple of minutes left. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, I meant to mention it last week. So when you search on YouTube, right? So part of my process of reviewing the whiskey, I'll do a whiskey neat. I'll try it with a little bit of water. Particularly in the summertime, I'm going to try it with some ice. Get my own sense of the whiskey. And then I'll watch a bunch of whiskey tubers. If you watch, say, the Whiskey Dictionary, if you watch, could be Rob Whiskey in the Six, could be Social Sipper Club, could be a lot of them. You'll see, if you go through the comments, you might see me say, I'll put a date, March 21st, 2021. I'm drinking a glass and comparing notes. That's all I'll say. Bill, Whiskey Dixie, one time he's like, why is he watching my video so late? He doesn't watch my material. Well, no, it's because, and then sometimes I'll actually rewatch a video I've already seen before. First time I watch it just to be watching it, and the second time I watch it in order to compare notes. So here's the thing. So when you search for a video, let's say Glendronach Peated, how many other people have reviewed this and compare reviews? So here's a tip. Compare reviews. So how many people have reviewed this whiskey? So after I post mine, how many people review this whiskey? What did they think versus what I thought? I'm hoping. Hey, Jason Coates, I haven't seen you in a while, man. Thanks for tuning in. Jim over at the Whiskey Novice. I've had him on before. Really, really cool guy. Killer beard. I really like his reviews. Check him out. But in terms of like comparing, when I was going through my Irish whiskeys series, I was comparing notes with him. All right. So one of the things YouTube does is when you search and you're watching a video, there's that recommended thing off to the side. It'll recommend other similar videos, right? Or similar category because you're searching. And then even if you're not still looking for that, it'll keep recommending video because it thinks you want to watch that. If you ever watch one cat video, YouTube thinks you just want to watch nothing but cat videos. It's like cat video. I mean, cat videos are funny, right? Furry critters are funny. They do all kinds of funny things. But if you watch one cat video, man, YouTube is going to try to cram cat videos down your throat. It's like, so the only way to get rid of that, to stop YouTube from recommending cat videos, you have to go into your history on your YouTube and erase all your history so that it knows, okay, he doesn't want to watch any more stupid cat videos, right? Well, when I was when I wanted to learn about the standing stones of Stenness and the Ring of Brodgar and was watching videos on that, YouTube recommended some videos. And the videos it recommended were the ancient alien astronauts. Yeah, submit to the algorithm. It was recommending ancient alien astronaut videos on the History Channel. And I was like, what? Ancient alien astronauts? What the heck is this? Well, apparently, according to ancient alien astronauts, they think the standing stones of Stenness, because there's no written materials, it's pure guess as to why they were built, how they got in there, what their worldview was, and what they believed in, because they're 5,000 years old or whatever. So it's pure guess, speculation. And so any place where there's very little information, ancient alien astronauts, could they have been built by ancient alien astronauts? Ancient alien astronaut theorists say yes. Well, of course they did. They say about freaking everything. What is the pyramids or anything else? It's the aliens that did it. So I got into watching ancient alien astronauts on the History Channel. I dig it. They've got like 16 seasons. I think they're in the 16th season now. During the Christmas break and before then, because of the shutdown, I basically binge watched every episode of the History Channel's Ancient Alien Astronauts. It is possible. I found them entertaining. You see a lot of really cool archaeological stuff that you're not going to hear about in mainstream history. There you go. Derek Beckman put the alien symbol on there. Yeah, I love it. They have a particular worldview, that has a particular understanding of creation, a particular understanding of eschatology, that is the future, and a particular understanding of the present. And they read and look at everything through the lens of their worldview and interpret everything through that, right? It's almost like seeing, a video of Bigfoot. It's always blurry and you can't hardly see anything, right? Same thing, some little blurry thing going like this, and they go, oh, it must be an alien spaceship. Anyway, if you're a believer, I don't mean to offend, but I got into watching ancient alien astronauts on the History Channel because of Scotch whiskey. I took an interest in the standing stones of Stenness, the rings of Brodgar, right? That led me to that, which then introduced me to the ancient alien astronauts and on the History Channel. So tonight, on the latest episode of Ancient Alien Astronauts, they're gonna have, yeah, maybe Bigfoot's just blurry. William Shatner, Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk is going to be on Ancient Alien Astronauts. I've set my thing to record it, but I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'm a big fan. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I grew up with Star Trek, right? And William Shatner, I met him a couple times. He's really entertaining. He's got a fantastic sense of humor, fantastic storyteller. See him up on stage. Really, I'm really looking forward to this. So tonight, pour yourself maybe some Highland Park, Highland Park, or Glendronach, and watch Ancient Alien Astronauts and check out Bill Shatner and what they got to say. I'm really looking forward to it. I know. I don't take it too serious. They make a lot of leaps and gaps. They conflate a lot of information. But I'm not going to turn this into. I would love to do a whole challenge on Ancient Alien Astronauts and responding to some of the stuff. It'd be fun. But anyway, try to keep an open mind. There's a lot of mysteries. I don't have a problem necessarily with the understanding and idea of beings on other planets. I don't have a problem with that. I just think you can reinterpret the entire history of planet Earth as that all this stuff was developed, or the technology behind it, by aliens. That's the part I have a problem with. That's the problem I have a problem with. Alrighty. So wrapping it up, we're past with the 1 hour mark. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and don't forget, live long and prosper. Right? Have an excellent weekend. And we'll see you again next week, same place, same time, here on Erik Wait Live. And cheers and Slangiava.